son Chris about to call me every day.
You're good to go.
Good evening, it's Monday, August 8th. Start the Common Council Finance and Human Resource Committee meeting. Common Council Member Scott Harrington.
Here.
Council Member John Rafter.
Here.
And Katie Lepage is excused. Any corrections needed for the minutes that were provided? John, you're good with it? Okay.
I'm actually going to ask Katie if you could just explain this one quickly, more succinctly than that.
As soon as I get my notes, I would be happy to. Okay, so currently the city has two separate contracts for occupational medical services. One is through Well-Now Urgent Care, which does things like drug and alcohol testing, certain types of employee physicals, other important occupational medical services. We also have a contract with Bassett Hospital through NICAM, which is the New York Agricultural, I can't remember what the acronym is, but it's a division of Bassett Health that's out in Fly Creek. So without getting into any specific issues, we've been having serious issues with Well-Now Urgent Care and their ability to really provide the services that we were promised in our contract in an effective, cost-effective, and in a way that meets the regulations. I mean, a lot of the things that we're doing are highly regulated, both at the state and federal level, for drug and alcohol testing and also certain types of physicals, especially for our CDL drivers and our bus drivers. So what we would like to do is enter into an addendum with Bassett, just expanding on the contract that we already have with them to provide other occupational medical services, so that way we'll kind of have them available to do that in place of Well-Now Urgent Care. What I like about this is it's a local option. I mean, Well-Now is obviously in the town. We will be utilizing services through Bassett at 125 Main Street, I think, Jimmy, is that right?
That's correct.
So it would kind of bring some of those services back into the city. It would also allow us to be part of the larger Bassett network, which would be a benefit to us. So we did bid the service last year, 2 years ago.
About that, yeah.
And Bassett was, of course, very competitive, and we already have awarded them another contract, so it's just modifying the terms of the contract that we have on file to add a couple different services, like specialty physicals and other, I think, drug and alcohol testing and 19A physicals for bus drivers.
Questions?
Is there any recourse against Well-Now if they're not meeting what's in the contract?
So a funny thing, they never
officially signed a
They
contract?
didn't sign a contract with us, so we're not really breaking anything. We are simply deviating from the proposal that the council had awarded at the end, well, I think it was 2 years ago, year and a half ago. So thus far, between Kelly Steinhaus, who's the city, she and I manage the city's drug and alcohol program together, Dave Hoteling and I, we've kind of been able to push Well-Now into making the changes that we need to have a fully compliant program, but it shouldn't be as difficult as it's been to do that. I mean, we're having employees given the wrong service, turned away for services, having ridiculously long wait times, being given drug and alcohol tests under the wrong testing authority. So they're very serious issues that we've done everything we can to attempt to correct.
Is this something, Katie, that you've been working on for a while? Because on the addendum it has a June 29th date.
Yes, it is something that I've been working on for a while. So I started, after the last serious issue we had, I reached out to Bassett to say, hey, what would it take? And they sent that information over so I could kind of do my due diligence and see, is it a competitive price? Well, I appreciate that it's going to be in the city. I just wanted to be sure it was the right fit for us. And so it's taken me about that amount of time to get it sorted out and also to work out the related purchasing issues with Jimmy's office.
And in essence, Well-Now is in breach of the contract or breach of their RFP for the services. And I've checked with Dave Merzick, and because they're in breach, there's no issue as far as not sending our employees there any longer.
Is there going to be a bump up in cost?
They are within dollars of each other per service, so we're not talking about a significant cost increase. But to have the services handled in the city and also done effectively, efficiently, and correctly is justifies the extra few dollars in my opinion.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll move that up to full council. Topic B.
We have a water treatment plant operator who has met all of the requirements to be promoted to a senior operator. Typically, we, at the 2-year mark, we promote people. And Scott Kellogg has been an employee, I don't have it with me, he's been an employee for years, serving in different capacities. He's really performs, in addition to operator duties, he works in the lab and does a lot of really community-facing work for bacteriological testing, and which is a very important service to homeowners. He meets the requirements, and I see no reason not to promote him. There's money available due to the resignation of another senior operator in May. So it's technically filling a budgeted vacant position.
We're actively recruiting to backfill new operator. And I think I've checked before, I think he's been with us full-time since 2019. Before that, for several years.
Part-time service.
Questions? Move that up to full council. Topic C.
Okay, one of our street projects this year is Garter Place Reconstruction from Main Street to Center Street, the extent of the city's portion of it. We recently issued a bid for that, and I'll let Chris kind of discuss the results of the bid.
We received 4 bids. The low bid was R.B. Robinson at a price of $433,907.05. 3 of the bidders were really close to the same price. One really high bid, L&T Construction, $705,000. I'd like to continue the project with R.B. Robinson. Going to go into the proposed changes.
Sure.
So right now, the design includes a 2-way street with the way the parking is set up currently. We're considering, talking with Greg, changing the design of the street to a one-way from Main Street to Center Street. The reason for doing this would allow us to add sidewalk on the west side of Garter Place. It also allows us to add a median for snow storage. We can add trees and just make the street a little bit nicer. But it would require making it a one-way, as there isn't enough room to do a full 2-way with parking. So we're proposing to change it from a 2-way to a 1-way. The price to do that, based on the bidders' prices, this is our estimate using their bid prices. One thing that wasn't included in their bid was sidewalk, so we used a bid price we had from the West Street project. It increases the price by about $31,000 to make it a one-way, adding this green space and the sidewalk. So we would like to pursue that, assuming that everyone else is on board. We'd like to have a public discussion. I want to talk with Luke Murphy. He's that's his ward. I want to get his input.
So that's the 6th Ward, Scott, invite Lane, just invite anyone from the area who wants to come more about it.
So assuming everyone's on board, we would like to change the design to a one-way. We actually already redesigned it. So we have both the design for a one-way and the design the way it currently stands. So, and just want to make sure we get everybody on board before we move that way. Are we going to recommend awarding the bid as it is and doing a change order, Greg?
I think so. I think we want to talk with Luke and see when we can get that public meeting scheduled. I wouldn't want to give the impression that the public meeting is the sole determiner of what we do here. I think certainly it's valuable to explain what we're doing and why, get their feedback. If there are any major considerations that we overlook or reasons that we should not proceed with it, we have to take those into account. The reason for us pursuing this at all, and for me kind of throwing a wrench in the works with suggesting changes, this falls in line with our complete streets policy we've had for a number of years now, trying to make the city more walkable. It's a street that doesn't have a sidewalk on the side. It has most of the houses where people are parking, they're walking to the west side. Most of the east side houses actually are parking on 5th Street to 3. And then it a street that's not the most attractive because it lacks street trees, it doesn't have a nice median. I mean, this would really improve the look of it. It's such low traffic volume. We asked Chris Wisberg, he had Sergeant Patricia took his speed radar detector out, set that up for a week. Which also counts cars, of course. There's 600 cars a day on the street. Most cars that go through there in one peak hour, which is 4 or 5 p.m., is 30 something in both directions. You don't really, we can't see there being a big negative or any real impact of changing the direction of traffic, other than snowstorms in the winter was a consideration. One of our employees, John, used to live out there at William Apartments and has that experience. Talking to the police as well, and then fire department, we figured that having one way up the hill of Garter is better than the other way around, because if it was downhill Garter, you'd have to drive up the steeper hill on Center Street to get up there. So we try to take everything into account. I think we've thought of pretty much all the concerns. Check the turning radius for fire truck access. Brian has a ladder truck up there today, and gave us his okay with what we do up. So that's just to give the context why we're looking at this, and I think realistically the difference being $30,000, benefit far outweighs that cost. Obviously, we have cost savings with narrowing the road, even in the future, adding the sidewalk that's not there now. Street trees would be part of this project. That'd be part of our regular, probably not this fall, next spring. I would think we'd be able to plant those. I think how many were there? 20 or more.
On that particular street?
Yeah, maybe.
Have we ever been? I think it doesn't.
Maybe it's a dozen. They're not there.
The only thing I wanted to add was the contractor, R.D. Robinson, is the same contractor we have on West Street, and they're very close to being complete with that project. They want to finish that project and head over to Garter Place, and they're actually talking about being able to get the majority of the project completed this year, getting binder in, and then doing the top in spring next year. So they're ready to move. So I don't know, are we going to go to council, next council?
That's the idea, is to sewer council on Tuesday. As far as funding, this does include students in the sewer main placement.
Yes.
That's included in this. The sewer portion of the work, which we're estimating $173,000. So the bid is the 430 and change, 433. If you add that, roughly 31,000, and then add a little bit of contingency on top of that, roughly 5%, we came up with a total of $490,000 is what we want to budget. 173 of which would be sewer, 317 general. The sewer portion of that, we would recommend coming out of the sewer, what is quotes unrestricted or other restricted reserve. We have about over $1 million in that now, close to 1.1. I spoke with Ginny earlier, and we're comfortable with using that amount from there. General fund, we get out of the CHIPS. That would be completely covered by the state fund that we have. So it wouldn't be a typical unrestricted general fund balance for the
How much did you originally estimated for that project?
I think when we did the general fund, we were around 300,000. It was pretty close. The general fund amount and sewer, I can't remember what you guys.
About 100,000 what we estimated, without contingency.
Questions?
You're only doing 5% contingency?
When we get into construction, we're actually awarding a bid, we usually do 5%. Looking at, a preliminary engineering cost, depending how preliminary it is, we might go from 10 to 20 or more, we have to go a couple years out. But now that we have an actual number, materials will be ordered based on that number. We don't expect any material price fluctuations to impact the cost. It would just be if the scope changes. So we realize that there's really not much that I foresee coming up that would change in construction, just given the fact that we're doing just about everything. The road we reconstructed, sub-base of pavement, new curbs, new storm line where there's one now. The sewer, we've already replaced all the old water services. We identified some old lead galvanized services we replaced over the last year.
They did the nice sag line there too, right?
Gas has been done, so there's not a whole lot that would jump up in nature.
The reason we included the sewer line is because we had the guys TV the line, and there was quite a bit of organic material, roots growing into the line, separating which, leads to I&I, inflow and infiltration, which is bad for the wastewater treatment plant. So being doing a full reconstruction, it's really a good time to do the sanitary sewer.
What's the future water line?
We just look at, there are design standards that we have to comply with or justify not complying with, one of which is horizontal and vertical separation between sanitary sewer and water needs. So the water is now scheduled to be replaced as part of this project, but in the future it will be at some point. And we're just kind of plotting where that could fit physically without violating a standard without being in the way of something else. So our water fund was overflowing with money, we could probably replace the water. But we just cannot afford it. With the other things on our plate upcoming in the next few years, even with our proposed increases, we're not planning to be taking on every water main on every street that we do, unfortunately.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we haven't had any water main breaks up there. It's not near dire situation as, Suncrest Terrace, College Terrace, River Street, those other areas that are really important to us now.
Teach yourself.
I'm not superstitious, it's a little.
Move that up to full council. If someone else is saying under it.
That's a good idea.
Topic D.
Well, this one is pretty simple in that we didn't receive any bids for the pavement markings bid that we put out. Chris, that means your opinion that that's basically due to the amount of work that's out there that these contractors have now. They didn't feel that they could get the work done this year, so they didn't submit a bid on our project. I guess what would our intent be?
I think we want to reach out to, one of these or a few of these marking contractors and see if they maybe at a minimum give us a price to do some of the important, pedestrian crossings, things of that nature, maybe certain stop bars that are important to us, arrows we talked about earlier today. We're certainly not going to get all of it done this year. The bid required that they do a complete painting of the entire city before the end of this season, and I think they find it to be near impossible to do considering their current workload. So maybe we can find somebody that can do a shortened version of what we want to do.
It was going to be a 3-year contract?
Yes.
So we'll put it back out to bid this fall and 4/23 forward. That way we'll at least have someone on board early, get started on time, finish everything we need to have done.
How much have we budgeted for this?
I don't know off the top of my head what we budgeted in the 2022 budget. I know that we have from years past, not getting everything done, over $10,000, I believe, to get everything done. We're not going to budget that much every year. Cut that down. I think we need to repaint everything every year. It's like giving us that while for everything. That's a full repaint.
Couple of years, right? When we were held up because of paint, we were shortage.
There was a paint shortage last year.
Last year,
We
right?
ended up having to paint some lines ourselves. We're really not set up, the city itself is not really set up to do painting on a mass scale. We just do a handful of crossings here and there. We can fit that in, but what's needed throughout the city, there's nothing we can handle.
Should just keep us informed of where you're making out with the negotiations with the companies on.
I don't know if John's called them yet, but I know that they've been very difficult to coordinate with, so I don't want to promise anything.
We just went through that up at work. We had to scale way back and then beg them to come, and then they called us and said, you got us for like this day, and that's the only day, so.
Topic E.
So we've mentioned a few of these upcoming infrastructure applications before. We wanted to just touch on this one a couple weeks specifically again. This one, Cdbg Community Development Block Grant Housing Application for private lead water line replacement. We've done a thorough review of our records and identified certain houses that, according to our records, may have a lead service or possibly a galvanized service. This grant would be to replace the privately owned portion of that, which do you have a handout, Judy? Want to hand them out? Just because sometimes it's easier, like, getting things on what the city is privately owned. We have this little handout that we're going to be sending to people so that they understand. So I think you guys all know, but the city-owned portion is from the water main to the curb stop, which is the shut-off valve, typically located just behind the curb, the sidewalk, shown there, and back to the sidewalk. We own that little valve as well, and then the city, or the privately owned portion is from there into the house. The city owns the water meter itself, which is typically in the house, occasionally it's a wall of that house. So this is a program that doesn't require any city match. It does require sort of a waiting list. That's why we're sending letters out to homeowners now to see who's interested, let them know that we think they might have a service that could be eligible for the program. When we get that list back, I think we have to have twice the number of interested homeowners as what we can actually apply for. So if we have 100 people say that they're interested, we would be able to apply for 50. We have to determine what we estimate the per service cost to be. That's something we're working on now.
Yeah, I have a few things. So the letter's going out with an income survey. The letter that's going out to these potential, there's like 130 some of these single-family and multi-family homes. Where I think if it didn't go out this afternoon, it's going out tomorrow. It's going to include an income survey. This is an income eligible project grant, if we're able to get it. It would be done in conjunction with a project that the city would also do with other funding, bill funding, the bipartisan infrastructure law funding for the public and private. So that grant could pay for our portion, but it can also pay for a portion of the other private ones that are not eligible for the Cdbg grant. The Cdbg grant would be for low-income households that are eligible for it. They would have to apply to the city if we got the grant. We're going to be budgeting money in there for a consultant that could administer this program. You can apply for up to $25,000 per household, but it's probably going to be somewhere lower than that, depending on what the level of costs are, which are probably going to be in the $10,000 to $15,000 range, we think, but we still have to figure that out by August 26th, which is the deadline. So, in addition to this, we need to do a public hearing at the next council meeting as well for the entire 2022 program year, which would allow us to be able to apply for this funding.
So I have a question. Jump in. I was confused. I'm looking at this. If a homeowner rather declines to replace their pipe or aren't among the, let's say, 50 folks out of 100, for the sake of a number, that wind up being selected as recipients of the grant funding, and so they decide not to change out their portion of the pipe. Are we still going in and taking care of our end of it up to the point where it meets the homeowner's component?
My recommendation would be that we should, yes. We're required, the EPA requiring that we inventory all of our lead service lines, including galvanized lines that are downstream of lead line, because the lead can, corrosion of lead can get into the galvanized pipe. We're required to inventory both private and public side, and we're supposed to put together a program to replace all of it. I forget the deadline. Is it 2025, 6, something like that?
6 or something, I think, by the end of 2023.
Is the inventory
complete, and then after that, the New York State law rule kicks in that we do lead and copper testing every other year. I'm not sure if that frequency is increasing, but if we test, if a certain number of our samples are over that threshold, it triggers us having to replace whatever percentage of our, I forget what it is, 3%, 5% of our lead services each year thereafter. So at this point, we haven't triggered that, and we're not past that initial date yet, but we could be looking at some point, bill at some point.
So I've got one more question, which would be, do you have, because you've got mailings going out, you must have a general idea of the number of homes that might be affected?
There's over 130 owner-occupied and multifamily.
And the expectation, Chris, is that we would, one way or the other, wind up doing our end of that service for 130-ish.
Well, there's more than 130-ish. There's about,
there's
700 total.
So we're going to, the bill funding, we have to do project listings for the bill funding. Those are due August 31st, this grant's due August 26th. We're submitting 2 projects for the bill funding. The first one is for the identified, or potential identified lead lines. And the second one that we're submitting is to be able to get funding through the bill funding for a study to identify the 700
So
that are left to look at.
The 700 lead lines, many of them are unknown. And because they're unknown, part of our inventory, we are required to assume that they are lead lines. So this study will allow us to go out and dig down along our curb box and determine if it in fact is a lead line or other type of material. So we have to do the study to determine how many of those 700 are in fact lead lines.
And then once we know that, then we'll be able to submit again for another project or more projects to address those through the bill funding. The bill funding is going to be available through 2026. So we're trying to hop on it and get as much of that as we can. I don't know what that bill funding amount will be for the laterals yet. Because it's so new, they're still working on that.
Thank you. Questions?
So are we liable for not changing out that pipe that the homeowner says, I can't afford to change it out? Is there any liability to the city? Because we recognize that it's a hazard, and that's the reason why we're changing this out?
I'm not aware, I can't speak to the liability.
And that would be
A question for the city attorney. Obviously, it's a privately owned service. This is an issue in cities across the country. The EPA does want all lead services replaced, not just city-owned. I think that's why there are programs like Bill and the Cdbg housing program that will, cities that can replace some private services to help that out. Obviously, the flip side of this, replace a service at the city's cost, privately owned service, that can replace with our normal mode of operation. You work on private property, you don't spend taxpayer or in this case ratepayer money on individual buildings.
The bill funding can be used on private property, but we would need a temporary easement for that. And we would take ownership of the lateral after that, they'd be on our own after that. But there are going to have to be some discussions as we progress with this and we get the funding in place and we know what the rules are about how that would work with the bill funding on private property, because it's only going to be a percentage of the total cost. So then it's, do you charge that homeowner for their share beyond, what the city's going to have to come up with it, but do you then pass those costs along? The incentive is, if you're low income and can't afford it, you can get it paid for 100% if we can get the Cdbg grant and you're eligible for that. So, it's kind of maybe a bit of a carrot and stick. Go for this if you can afford it, or if you are eligible for it, because you may have a cost later.
So my part to my question was what you just said, and so please keep me, so the committee informed on whether or not we can charge them, and then they can pay us back in 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, that'll have to be a discussion with the city attorney and the funding agencies, how that works. They're just starting to get the requirements and how the program's going to work out. I mean, they just did a webinar for the first time on Friday, so everything's new right now.
And don't we believe that that should be information that's for the public to see? Meaning, if someone was interested in purchasing my home and I have this lead-based pipe, potential purchasers should know that I have lead-based paint. They definitely should know that I turned it down because I said I couldn't afford to do it. But I think that's a different twist on someone buying a home.
Yeah, and it's possible too that, well, no, never mind that. I'm thinking out loud. No, forget it. Never mind.
Also, I just want to add that I have contacted NICOM as far as the regulations, if we're allowed to replace the lead pipes on private property. And they have, as Judy said, they're still interpreting the terms of the grant. And they said that they will get back to us as soon as they've made a determination. I think they passed it up to their legal department to find out how to interpret the guidelines.
Because that Friday, that was the EFC and the Department of Health did that webinar, and they clearly said it was. So hopefully NICOM comes back with the same, because that's the purpose of the bill money, is to get those private laterals taken care of. But they clearly said that it was okay, but you needed to have the temporary easement in place.
I think the intent, again, I think I said before, the EPA wants to get lead services completely out of the water system, so I think they recognize that requiring homeowners to do it is going to take forever, so there has to be some help following that through the water suppliers.
Right.
Obviously, it's more cost effective for them to do it when the city's doing their portion, rather than trying to get a separate contractor to come in and do it on their own. It's just,
Well, it would be a separate contractor, most likely, because this money is the Cdbg money, not the bill money. The Cdbg money would come to the city, but it would be paid directly to the homeowner, so they would have a contract with the contractor. So the city can help with that process, and that's another reason why we'd like to have a consultant administering the program, because there'll be a lot of intake with the applications, there'll be a lot of work with the contractors and the homeowners. It could be the big contractor if they want to bid on, give a price on some of these little lateral projects, but it's most likely not going to be the big contractor, it would be small local contractors. And we'll help as much as possible with that process.
so for today's purposes, we're approving just, you're applying for this grant.
Yeah, so we're going to have a public hearing at council, and we're also going to have a resolution to apply for submit the application. It's likely going to be in the $300,000 range, because trying to administer a $500,000 project as well as having 50 homeowners. I don't know if we'll have that many that are eligible. So we're probably going to be down to 30 to 40 homes, not 50. That's my assumption.
Is there a reason why you only pick on the 130 out of this potential pool?
The 130 are known
That's
lead
what we have
services,
identified.
others are on, the 700 are unknown.
They're identified, and we're hitting these deadlines right now that we want to get this first project in and going, and then there'll be future projects.
These are, again, just strictly on the private side. There are also certain lead services that are lead only, identified lead only on the city side, not the private side, that make up a proportion of the 700.
Topic Beth?
Or you're going to preface it? You want me to do this? So in the theme of we're trying to catch all this infrastructure funding that's coming down the pike, there's a Water Infrastructure Improvement Act money. There's a WIA application deadline due September 9th. So we have a number of we have a couple of sewer projects, but we're not going to be applying to WIA for them right now. And we have a number of water projects that I have them here on the timeline. We're trying to just make sure we all agree on the timeline, and then we're going to be submitting for water projects, which will likely be there was some water tank and some distribution main. We submitted a very large project to get it on the intended use plan so that we could apply for this funding. But I think we're going to split it. It was over 12 million. We're going to split it into like two $6 million phased projects. So one of those is going to be going in for the September 9th deadline. I'm not sure yet if we'll have anything else that we're putting in, but we'll know by council, and because we're meeting on it this week to determine that. So we just will be able to update you at council on which ones are going in. We'll need bond resolutions, so that will be coming in for that meeting as well.
And we're talking about next.
Or possibly the first meeting in September for the bond resolutions, because it takes a little bit to get them ready. So either next meeting or the meeting after that, we'll have this sorted out and come in to tell you exactly what's going in. But we wanted to give you a heads up now.
So potentially 12 million?
No, probably, I think it's going to be probably one $6 million project, and then the funding between WIA and bill funding, I think we would be eligible for up to 60% or $5 million in a given year. So we're still working on the numbers and exactly what's going in.
Any other questions?
Is this the bond, when you talk about the bonds, is part of the scheduled bonds that we're talking about last year, or is this a new bond that we were thinking of?
I don't know, Greg, do you know if this work was in that?
We haven't, any questions, Scott?
Like last year, we were talking about, during the budget process, we were talking about possible upcoming bonds, and we were buying millions and millions of dollars we were talking about. Is this part of that we were discussing last year with bonds, or is this a new one that's getting added on to all those other bonds with what we're trying to figure out for projects?
This is all kind of part of it. If you think of that Waterworth graphic where we showed, our costs extended, projected over the next 20, 25 years, we had built into that a certain amount of distribution system projects and treatment plant projects, and kind of built in assumptions for bonding over time. So this would fall into that. Specifically, what year we had projected that in the last talk, I'm not sure.
I don't think it was a project. I just think we were talking about, I think we were going like 5 years out or something like that. We were talking in the budget process last year of potential millions of dollars of bonds for all these projects. And I was just curious if that fell in, discussing what we were discussing last year.
So this, I think Judy mentioned the West End storage tank will be part of this, and I'm not sure how many linear feet total of water main replacement we have planned with that. Basically, whatever amount adds up to $6.5 million. So things like the Crestmark, Central Terrace area, River Street, small forage diameter water mains, all there is would be the first to be covered.
Thanks.
Topic G.
Okay, so we've been talking about this for a little while, Judy and I and Stephen, obviously isn't here tonight, but we, looking at our economic development strategy, we're doing this planning and development consultant, which would support our planning and development department. We think hiring an experienced consultant, someone who has experience developing private and public projects, working on those both with developers and with municipalities, to assist our department, basically trying to put us in a better position to be able to attract large developers, but also develop the capabilities of smaller building owners and local developers who want to get involved in either bigger projects or just understand how to better implement their projects. That would really strengthen the abilities of our department, grow our capacity a bit, and I think economic development being a priority, trying to attract residents and fill out our empty portions of downtown and elsewhere. I think this would be my possible spending. The easiest thing to kind of explain is just go through some bullets that I came up with that kind of summarize what this consultant would provide to the city. So the first area would be developer recruitment. they'd be marketing to their existing developer clients, people that they know, they're in this industry, they work in it, they have connections, and they'll market to people who may be interested in certain projects that might be available in the city, as well as marketing to new developers, including our local building owners. We've heard in the past that there are local people who own buildings now, and they feel as though they don't, the city might go after a large developer, but not care so much about small developers. That's not the case, but I think this would be something where we can help provide some education to them on things such as historic tax credits, grant funding that may be available to them. Things such as evaluating potential developable sites. The city may be aware of sites that we do not own, that we're not the developer on, but someone might come to us and say, I'm looking to do a project here, but I don't really know, they don't really know how to go about it. They don't have a professional team on board. That's where the consultant can help come in, have a meeting with them, advise, here's what you might want to do next. Maybe they'll take a look and do a quick pro forma of this type of development that you're looking to do. How does it make sense financially? Is it feasible? Just give them a little guidance. I mean, it helps them directly, but it's helping the city because this is our version or our way of impacting economic development. We would our consultant would stop short of preparing drawings and plans and anything specifically for the developer or building owner, but that could be something that they could be hired to do separately. Kind of just make the introduction, get people on the same page, what our capabilities are, how the city can help, and how they might be able to help themselves if they don't already know. Third area, project development. I kind of just talked about that. Third area was more architectural conceptual design review. We see this consultant probably being an architect that has experience with developers and specifically with historic preservation and an old city like Uniana that has buildings that can be rehabilitated. But not saying they wouldn't have experience with new construction as well, but having that sort of expertise allows them to advise really specifically, not just on the process of getting historic tax credits or whatever it may be, but here's some considerations looking at your specific building that you need to take into account. And they can advise the city directly on, if we get an application in for a project that might benefit from this kind of a conversation, we can just refer to them and maybe suggest that that's developer should have a conversation about this. So what we would propose is doing an RFQ, selecting a qualified consultant, and for a retainer, we're thinking around $10,000 a year. We state that right in the RFQ rather, limiting it to that amount so we can kind of pick and choose, based on the need when they need to help us out. They might not spend $10,000, they might spend all of it. That would be an itemized invoice process. Very similar to how we do our grant writing now. We have some consultants that's hired as our grant writer. They assist Judy's department with the CFA process and any other grant applications that we need their help writing. This is a separate thing that we're talking about now, separate service from what they provide. We're thinking around the same amount, $10,000 per year. As far as how it could be funded, speaking with Ginny, we've got the Housing Division's CD loan repayments that we get each year from the Cdbg loan to Housing Division about their project. We get around $13,000 per year, and I'm not sure if that changes or if that's flat, pretty flat through 2048. So this is a steady stream of income that previously was dedicated by the city from our general funds to the economic development project. It's now coming back in. I think it would make sense for that source of fund for future economic development initiative. So it wouldn't affect the general fund budget going forward. Certainly, it's something that we could stop doing at any time. I think our RFP would probably be for 5 years, even when we're doing with the option to terminate the contract at the end of each year if it wasn't, benefiting the city. It's the way we expect. Judy, something to add?
I don't. I think you covered it all.
Right.
So during the reading of the RFQs, how much weight is going to be put on the historic preservation?
We've got to develop that. We haven't developed the actual RFQ at this point, scoring matrix. I don't know if we get that specific with scoring. We put in there the expertise that we're looking for. And then there's, you show the RFP, you got your team, qualifications of the firm, qualifications of the specific individuals that So I don't know if we would assign a specific percentage for their score, score preservation, but it would be something to look back.
Because is that a common profession?
So,
I think it's common enough around upstate New York or around New York, especially because we have these old communities that still actually have intact historic districts and historic buildings and downtowns and stuff. I think we could get a good response from consultants that have that experience.
Right.
And I think it's important. You know, we're trying to expand our historic districts. We're trying to help people renovate their homes and find ways to be able to afford to do that. And this is a really important way that they can do that.
It's something that a lot of people don't know much about.
Yeah.
It's been talking about it for years now, but especially local building owners, people who aren't in the big development business don't really know about this and haven't been able to take advantage of it because they have a plan for it. They get into the project and learn about it, it's too late. So getting the education out there and getting them involved early on should make it better for a lot of people.
Questions?
so what are you looking for? I mean, for tonight, just that we're on board with this, or are you looking for this to go to the council, or?
It's not ready for council yet. I think if you're generally supportive of it, we would prepare the RFQ.
Yeah, I'd
go
like to
through
see
that
the
process and
I wouldn't mind seeing the RFQ when you guys get it put together first, and then I could make more of my determination. But I mean, on the, listening to it, it sounds very intriguing and could be very helpful, so.
I gotta say, if you don't mind, this is along the lines of something that I've been talking about, a number of other people have been talking about for a very long time, but beyond that, it fleshes it out in a way that I hadn't even conceived of, and it's paid for appropriately, so, and it's not a contract where you're looking at a fixed amount of money. It's going to be as we need the individual, and it could wind up being less. I hope, in fact, that we keep this individual or this firm more busy than not busy, but it really does hit a lot of the boxes for me that I know a number of people have been talking about our need to be able to essentially put a point person out there, you know, and really start to bring some of the community development, the planning and development into the city, and allow Steve and Judy and Sarah to do the work within the context of City Hall.
Sounds good.
so we'll bring back to this committee when we have the RFP ready before RFQ, but before we issue it.
Need for an executive session? I'd like to call for an executive session so that we can talk about a personnel issue.